Queen Camilla was unaware that Catherine was observing her when she leaned down to talk to Princess Charlotte. Additionally, what transpired next altered everything. Set against the backdrop of Windsor, it had begun like any other spring weekend on the royal calendar, meticulously planned and full of family responsibilities. However, Princess Catherine didn't feel comfortable with this specific gathering for whatever reason. Over the years, she had come to trust her gut, particularly when it came to her kids. Charlotte had been unusually silent all morning, not grumpy or furious, simply withdrawn, as if attempting to fit into the background. And she wasn't like that at all. In recognition of one of the Queen Consort's recent philanthropic patronages, the family had convened at Windsor Castle for a private luncheon. Although these occasions were common, they united multiple generations under one roof. Catherine's relatives, Camilla's people, and frequently a mix of extended royals who didn't always get along. These incidents didn't bother Catherine, but she continued to exercise caution. While Prince William could relax into his act, she had to watch everything. Charlotte had been invited to join the younger set of royal relatives in one of the side salons that afternoon. It was a formal enough setting, but casual by royal standards. While the adults interacted in the main hall, the kids were supposed to act appropriately, have courteous conversations, and enjoy their afternoon tea. After assisting Charlotte into her seat and giving her a quick kiss on the forehead, Catherine exited the room. So far, nothing seemed strange. However, later on, something changed. Catherine was chatting with a senior courtier around 45 minutes into the event when she noticed Charlotte passing one of the open doors across the hallway. The young child's face had gone pale and her mouth was pushed into a tight line, but she wasn't weeping. She appeared to be emotionally bruised rather than injured in the sense of a scratched knee. Mid-sentence, Catherine excused herself and trailed behind. At the far end of the corridor, close to one of the service doors, she discovered Charlotte by herself. She was staring at the ground with her hands clasped in front of her. "What happened?" Catherine softly inquired. Charlotte paused. "Nothing, Mommy." However, Catherine had now lowered herself to eye level. "I can tell when anything is awry, sweetie." Charlotte's voice came out gently. "I was bragging, according to Granny Camilla. She instructed me to remain silent until someone spoke to me." Catherine gave a blink. "What time did she say that?" Charlotte stated, "We were just playing a guessing game, but she became irritated when I informed Louises the solution to a question." Catherine took a while to respond. Although she appeared stable and composed on the surface, everything inside of her had changed as she pulled Charlotte into an embrace and held her there. She had always attempted to maintain peace with Camilla, even when their relationship felt like a forced dance. Camilla has her own opinions about behavior and hierarchy. Even while she frequently covered them up with a grin, her tone occasionally revealed who she was. Nevertheless, Catherine had believed that her kids would never experience those taunts and rejections. However, she was mistaken. Later that day, when the family strolled through the grounds, Catherine sat next to Charlotte. Camilla was ahead, strolling beside Charles and conversing as though the morning had gone smoothly. Catherine kept a close eye on her. It wasn't just the comment, though. It was because Charlotte had felt compelled to conceal herself. The families reconvened inside following the garden tour. Catherine watched everything with subtlety. Charlotte once reached over to the refreshment table for a second scone. "Maybe one is enough, darling," Camilla murmured with a half smile as she turned and looked down. "We don't want to come across as avaricious." Once more, there it was. Now Catherine could see it plainly. It wasn't an isolated incident. These were trends. Tiny incidents that, when viewed in isolation, didn't seem harsh, built up when repeatedly directed at the same youngster. Catherine did not immediately respond. She wasn't the kind to cause a stir, but she had always been purposeful in her silence, and now she had had enough. As of yet, William had not observed anything. He had been talking timetables with Charles and a few senior assistants. But later that evening, once they were back at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine would bring it up as a mother who had seen something she couldn't ignore. However, something else happened before that discussion could take place. Catherine didn't think living as a royal would be simple. She was aware of the burden of responsibility, the unwritten rules, and the difficulty of maintaining appearances while managing the real world behind the scenes. However, she would never tolerate anyone making her kids feel inferior, even if it wasn't a family member. The tea had just been cleared when the moment arrived. One of the sitting rooms off the main gallery was where the grown-ups relocated. It was a long-standing custom that dates back to the Queen's reign. Before their nannies took them upstairs, the kids were permitted indoors for a while. Charlotte had entered the room with George and Louis, her face expressionless. She sat beside the fireplace, flipping through a book she'd taken off the shelf. At that moment, Camilla came into the room with her glass of water and one of her longtime companions, laughing softly. She appeared to be in a pleasant mood. She turned to face the grown-ups after spotting the kids and grinning briefly, but the laughter subsided after a short while. Charlotte stayed on the recliner as George and Louis strolled over to their grandfather, who was standing at Charles's side. "May I play the piano for a bit?" Charlotte asked Camilla courteously after a short while. Camilla cast a quick glance over her shoulder. "The piano?" "Yes," Charlotte answered. Just quietly. After taking a sip from her glass, Camilla turned to face her. "That's not required, darling. Give some calm to the adults. Why don't you act like a nice young woman by sitting still?" It wasn't loud or cruel, but it was pointed. Adults frequently underestimate the impact of the words. The tone was acerbic. Charlotte's cheeks reddened. She quietly closed her book and folded her hands. It was heard by Catherine. She had been conversing with Lady Landon while standing close by. Her gaze flitted from Camilla to Charlotte. She remained silent for a while, but Camilla observed that she was staring for longer than normal. After a brief moment of eye contact, Camilla averted her gaze. The room went on. The energy changed, but the conversations resumed. That evening, back at Adelaide Cottage, Catherine put Charlotte to bed. Now the home was quieter. George was already asleep, and William was wrapping up a conversation with his private secretary. "Did you feel upset today?" Catherine inquired while perched on the side of Charlotte's bed. Charlotte appeared uncertain. "A little, but I'm fine." Catherine replied softly, "You don't have to pretend." Charlotte gave a nod. "Granny Camilla doesn't like when I talk too much." There it was, straightforward, honest, and clear. After giving herself a forehead kiss, Catherine got up and moved down the corridor. William looked up as she crossed the study. He said, "Is she all right?" "She's attempting to be," Catherine answered. William reclined in his seat. "What took place?" With clarity rather than rage, Catherine told him everything. She reiterated what Charlotte had said. She then explained how she had witnessed Camilla's icy comments, contempt, and persistent attempts to minimize or silence Charlotte. William listened and didn't interrupt, but when Catherine finished, his jaw was set. "We won't overlook this," she declared. He said, "I agree, but we handle it carefully." Catherine asked Charlotte to stay home from her next planned event the next morning. Camilla had organized a charity garden project for a variety of royal grandchildren. In reality, Catherine didn't want Charlotte in that area again, so she made up an excuse about having a slight cold. Not until she was certain it would be secure. Camilla was informed that Charlotte would not be going. She didn't say anything, merely raised a brow when one of her helpers noted it, then said something under her breath. Most likely too fragile for a small amount of muck. Catherine was also informed of that. The royal households are more talkative than they acknowledge. If not for what transpired the next weekend, the situation may have remained that way. At H. Hirove, there was a small private dinner. In the hopes of having a laid-back evening, Charles had invited both William and Catherine. It was an easy strategy. Reconnect, spend time together as a family, and talk about future royal tour. However, things quickly got out of hand when Catherine entered the main lounge with Charlotte, who had only come to say hello to her grandfather before bed. Camilla sat by the fire and hardly looked up. With a courteous grin, Charlotte entered and said, "Good evening, Granny." Camilla did not return the smile. She asked, "Are you sure you're not too tired to be here?" Everyone in the room heard the barely concealed jab. Catherine's gaze remained fixed on Camilla. She wasn't waiting till later this time. The atmosphere in the room changed just by her quiet. A harsher smile had taken the place of the courteous one she had worn when they first arrived. "Why don't you say good night to Grandpa and head upstairs with Anna?" she calmly asked Charlotte, who looked up at her mother with a hint of uncertainty. Catherine nodded slightly to her. After approaching Charles and giving him a hug, the young girl and the family nanny departed the room. Silence ensued as the door clicked shut behind them. Camilla reclined while continuing to grasp her wine glass. "Well, she's very sensitive, isn't she?" she murmured softly after taking a quick look around. William froze. His father shuffled uneasily in his chair, but Catherine now moved forward, carefully selecting each phrase. "No, she's not overly sensitive. She should be treated with kindness because she is a youngster." Camilla furrowed her brow. "That's not how I meant it. She's still awake at this hour, which astonished me. It's rarely a cause for concern." Catherine didn't blink. "It wasn't limited to tonight. It has been taking place for weeks. Both she and I have heard what has been said to her." The room grew colder. Charles attempted to step in. "Maybe we should all just say no," Catherine cut in, remaining composed but forceful. "We would move on if it were just one comment, but it's not one comment. I won't tolerate my daughter being made to feel inferior because it's a pattern." Camilla glanced at William, hoping he would intervene, but he didn't. His quiet was more powerful than his words. Catherine went on, "I've tried to keep peace because that's what's expected of me. I've disregarded times when things didn't feel right. However, this is not the same. Charlotte is involved in this, and I won't allow anyone to erode her confidence, regardless of who they are." Camilla laid her glass down, finally leaning forward. "You're reading too much into this. You're always very serious about stuff. Youngsters are resilient." Catherine's face remained unchanged. Youngsters retain the way they are addressed, particularly by those who are meant to keep children safe. Nothing about it was dramatic. Although Catherine didn't yell or storm, there was no denying the strength in her voice. It was a mother's voice that had made a distinction. At last, William said something. "We are requesting fundamental respect. Charlotte hasn't done anything improper. She is simply being herself. That shouldn't be an issue." Camilla turned to face Charles, but he had also fallen silent. He was wise enough not to push. Catherine was establishing a boundary. There was no turning back after she did it. Catherine excused herself and left the room after a tense few minutes. William came shortly after. Catherine sat beside Charlotte's bedside once again upstairs. She didn't inquire as to if anything was wrong this time. She simply grasped her daughter's hand. She assured her, "You did nothing wrong. You were courteous. All I will ever ask of you is that you be kind." Charlotte raised her gaze. "I made an effort." "You don't need to strive for perfection," Catherine remarked. "You just have to be you." Downstairs, Charles tried to smooth things over by changing the conversation, but Camilla didn't say much. She didn't express regret. But she didn't defend herself again either. William and Catherine conversed in their chamber at Adelaide Cottage later that evening. Despite being exhausted throughout the day, Catherine remained composed. She said that she didn't have to like me, but she will treat Charlotte with respect. That cannot be negotiated. William responded, "She will, because we will not allow this to go on." The days that followed were courteous but different. Catherine decided to invite only her immediate family to Charlotte's school performance, which was being held at Lambrook. Camilla was left out. Although the palace described it as a scheduling difficulty, insiders were aware of its true meaning. Nothing changed in the press. As usual, pictures of people smiling and displaying elegance and unity were made public. However, something had changed inside the palace walls. Camilla continued to attend important occasions, but she avoided Charlotte. At least not in Catherine's line of sight. There were no more casual comments or glances. However, Catherine had set a limit.
What it is.
What it is, exactly, and how we can support not only ourselves but each other as well.
Behind the polished smiles and perfectly timed photographs, something fundamental had shifted. Not a scandal, not a headline, but a boundary quietly drawn and firmly enforced. Catherine didn't raise her voice. She didn't wage a public battle. She did something far more powerful. She chose her child. In a world governed by tradition, hierarchy, and silence, she reminded everyone of one simple truth. Titles do not excuse cruelty, and age does not erase accountability. Charlotte would grow up knowing that her voice mattered, that kindness was not a weakness, and that her mother would always stand between her and anyone who tried to make her feel small. Inside palace walls, the lesson was understood. Respect was no longer optional, and while the cameras would continue to capture unity, grace, and royal calm, those closest to the truth knew better. Because from that moment on, nothing was quite the same again. And sometimes, the most powerful revolutions begin with a mother refusing to stay quiet.